The gun lay between us, silent and final. My fingers trembled as I wrapped my hand around it, the cold metal biting into my skin. Across the table, the man watched me without impatience, without anger, as if my choice were nothing more than an interesting experiment. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Behind the closed door, my daughter slept peacefully, her soft breathing a cruel reminder of everything I could lose in the next 60 seconds. "Choose," he said at last. "Pull the trigger, and you walk out alive." His gaze darkened. "Don't. And your daughter never comes home." Time fractured. My mind searched desperately for a third option, a miracle, a way out that didn't exist. I had spent my life avoiding powerful men. Men like him destroyed lives without consequence. So why was the most dangerous man I had ever met giving me a choice? And why did it feel like no matter what I decided, I was already his? The first time Elena felt the weight of a gun in her hand, she understood that every story has a moment it circles long before it begins. But on the night everything truly started, there was no weapon, no blood, no impossible choice. There was only music, dim light, and a woman who still believed her life was small enough to remain unnoticed. Elena had never imagined her quiet existence would brush against the world of men like him. She was a night singer in a modest jazz club, the kind of place where tired souls gathered to forget themselves for a few hours. The lights were always low, the air always thick with smoke and murmured confessions. She sang to pay rent. She sang to keep milk in the refrigerator. She sang because the dreams she once carried had been carefully buried beneath responsibility and fear. Music was no longer hope. It was necessity. That night began like any other. Elena stepped onto the small stage, adjusted the microphone, and let her voice spill into the room. It was not loud, but it carried something raw and intimate, like a wound that had never fully healed. Conversation softened. Glasses paused in midair. Even the piano seemed to listen. She didn't notice him at first. He sat in the VIP booth near the back, half hidden by shadow, flanked by men who looked less like companions and more like guardians, while others smiled or swayed gently to the rhythm. He did neither. He did not applaud when her first song ended. He did not look away when the crowd erupted into polite clapping. His gaze stayed fixed on her, unblinking, deliberate, as if he were memorizing her rather than enjoying the performance. Elena felt it midway through her second song, that uncomfortable awareness of being watched, not with desire, but with intention. Her voice faltered for the briefest moment before she steadied herself, fingers tightening around the microphone stand. She told herself it was nothing. Powerful men came to the club often. Power always liked the dark corners. She finished her set, bowed quietly, and slipped backstage, her heart beating a little faster than usual. After the final notes faded and the room thinned, Marco, the club manager, found her by the cracked mirror in the dressing area. His expression was cautious, the same look he wore whenever trouble came wrapped in politeness. "There's a gentleman who wants to speak with you," he said. "Privately." Elena didn't hesitate. "No," Marco sighed. "He's important." She smoothed her hair, meeting her own tired reflection. "Then he can be important somewhere else." She reached for her coat. "That won't be necessary." The voice came from behind her, calm and unhurried. Elena turned slowly. The man from the VIP booth stood just inside the doorway. Up close, his presence was heavier, as if the air itself had adjusted to accommodate him. He was impeccably dressed, his dark suit tailored with quiet precision. His face was composed, refined, but his eyes held something colder, sharper, like a storm restrained by discipline. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said. "I won't take much of your time." Elena forced a polite smile, every instinct urging caution. "I'm finished for the night." "I know," he replied. His gaze flicked briefly to the clock on the wall. "You finish at 11, every night except Sunday." Her smile stiffened. "You sang tonight as if your heart were breaking," he continued, his tone conversational. "I would like to hear you sing again. For me, somewhere quieter." "I don't do private performances," Elena said quickly. "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "I'm offering—" She was preparing to refuse again when he spoke once more, his voice unchanged, almost gentle. "Your daughter's name is Maya. She's 6. You live in a third-floor walk-up on Delancey Street. The hallway light has been flickering for 2 months, and your landlord keeps promising to fix it." The room went cold. Elena felt it first along her spine, a sharp, instinctive chill. Her fingers tightened around her coat. She waited for the threat to come, for the smile to turn cruel. It didn't. He watched her reaction with measured interest, then gave a slight nod, as if confirming something to himself. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "If I intended to harm you, you wouldn't be standing here." That frightened her more than any threat could have. Why are you telling me this? She asked, keeping her voice steady through sheer effort. Because honesty saves time, he replied. He reached into his jacket and removed a simple card, holding it out between two fingers. And because you deserve to know who is speaking to you. Elena hesitated before taking it. Dante Russo. The name sat on the card in clean, understated lettering. No title, no company, just a name heavy with implication. She had heard it before, in whispers that fell silent when she entered a room. A name associated with money that never ran out and problems that never stayed buried. Her pulse thundered in her ears. I'm not interested in whatever this is, she said quietly. I have a child. Something flickered in his eyes at that. Not surprise. Recognition. So do I, Dante replied after a pause. Or rather, I did. The words landed with unexpected weight. Silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. Dante stepped back, giving her space she hadn't asked for. I won't pressure you tonight, he said. Consider my offer. I'll be in touch. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. And Elena, he added softly, without looking back. From this moment on, some people will notice you. If anything feels wrong, call me. The door closed behind him. Elena stood frozen, the card trembling in her hand. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror, eyes wide, breath shallow. She had been seen, not as background, not as invisible, but as something worth watching. And the man who had noticed her was someone she had spent her entire life avoiding, for the first time in years. Elena felt the ground beneath her feet shift, subtle but undeniable. She did not yet know how high the cost would be, or how deep this path would drag her. She only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life would never be quiet again. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Elena did not sleep that night. The name Dante Russo followed her from room to room, settling into the quiet corners of her apartment like an unwelcome guest. She replayed the encounter again and again, examining every word, every pause, every glance, searching for the moment where danger had revealed itself too clearly to ignore. But what unsettled her most was not fear. It was the absence of it, the calm certainty with which he had spoken, the way he had known her life without ever touching it. The card lay on the kitchen table beside unpaid bills and a chipped mug. It did not belong there. It was too clean, too deliberate, like a fracture in the ordinary chaos of her world. Elena considered throwing it away. She even picked it up once, walked toward the trash can, then stopped. She told herself she was being cautious, not curious. That was a lie she would repeat often in the days to come. 2 evenings passed without incident. No messages, no cars waiting outside, no unfamiliar footsteps on the stairs. The silence was almost insulting, as if Dante Russo had decided she was no longer worth his attention. Elena tried to be grateful. Instead, she felt exposed, suspended between relief and anticipation. On the third night, her phone vibrated. An address, a time, no greeting, no explanation. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment, her pulse steady but heavy. She thought of Maya asleep in the next room, of the careful routines that made her life feel manageable. She thought of the way Dante had said her name, not as a claim, but as a fact, whether she went or not. She understood something fundamental had already shifted. Being noticed could not be undone. She went. The car that arrived outside her building was black and discreet, driven by a man who spoke only to confirm her name. Elena watched the city slide past the window, neon lights blurring into muted reflections against the glass. The farther they traveled, the quieter the streets became, until the noise of the city gave way to the steady hush of waves crashing against rock. The house stood alone on the cliffs, all clean lines and dark glass, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond it. No guards stood at the gate. No spectacle announced her arrival. Dante opened the door himself. He was dressed simply this time. No tie, sleeves rolled back. His presence less formal, but no less commanding. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I haven't agreed to anything," Elena replied, her voice controlled. "I wouldn't expect you to," he answered calmly. Inside, the house felt unexpectedly restrained. No excess, no gold or marble meant to intimidate. Books lined the walls, art chosen with care rather than wealth. And at the center of a wide room overlooking the sea stood a grand piano, black and polished, waiting. "This is where I'd like you to sing," Dante said. "If you choose to?" Elena approached slowly, fingertips brushing the smooth surface. "You're very confident." "I'm observant," he replied. "You wouldn't be here if you weren't considering it." She didn't argue, because he was right. They ate a simple meal together. No wine, no music. Conversation moved carefully, touching on safe topics, cities she had never seen. Music she loved but no longer sang for herself. Dante listened more than he spoke, his attention unnerving in its focus. He did not ask about Maya. He did not press. His restraint felt intentional, strategic. When Elena finally sang, the house seemed to hold its breath. Her voice filled the space, softer than in the club, more exposed. There was no crowd to impress, no noise to hide behind. Only the sea beyond the glass, and the man watching her as if the song were meant for him alone. When she finished, silence followed, deep and unbroken. Dante stood slowly. "I lost my daughter," he said quietly. 16 years ago, Elena's breath caught. "I don't tell people that," he continued. But tonight felt honest. The confession landed between them, fragile and unexpected. Elena understood then that this evening was not a transaction. It was a convergence of wounds. When she left, escorted back into the night, she believed she had navigated the danger intact. She was wrong. The next afternoon at the club, Marco pulled her aside, his face drawn. "2 men came looking for you," he said. "Foreign? Russian? Maybe?" Elena's stomach tightened. "I didn't say anything," Marco added quickly. "Neither did anyone else. Russo's people showed up not long after. Made it clear you were off limits." Her heart began to race. Dante had acted without telling her, protected her without permission. That evening, her phone buzzed again. "You should know. Others are watching now." Anger flared hot and sudden. Elena called him immediately. "You said you wouldn't pressure me. I didn't," Dante replied evenly. "I informed you. You made me visible. You already were," he said. "I simply stepped between you and them." Elena hung up without responding, her thoughts colliding in a storm of fear and reluctant gratitude. She wanted to believe she could walk away, return to the small life she had known. But deep down, she understood the truth she was not ready to face. Walking away would not make her safer. It would only make her alone. And somewhere beneath the unease, another realization took shape, one she refused to name just yet. For the first time in years, someone powerful was not looking through her. He was looking at her. And that, Elena knew, was far more dangerous than she had ever been prepared for. Elena began to understand the meaning of Dante Russo's attention through absence rather than presence. The street outside her apartment was quieter, too quiet. The flickering hallway light that had tormented her for months was suddenly fixed without explanation. The unfamiliar men who used to linger near the corner cafe were gone. Nothing dramatic happened, and that was precisely what unsettled her. Safety, when it arrived without consent, felt disturbingly similar to control. She tried to ignore it, tried to live as she always had. She walked Maya to school every morning, holding her daughter's small hand, forcing herself to smile at other parents while her eyes scanned reflections in windows, shadows in passing cars. She told herself she was being paranoid, that the city was simply being a city. At the club, the change was impossible to miss. Conversations lowered when Elena entered the room. Marco avoided her gaze, guilt flickering across his face before he looked away. One of the bartenders whispered her name as if it carried weight now. When Elena finally cornered Marco in his office, he exhaled heavily and admitted the truth. "They've been asking about you," he said. "Different people, different accents, same questions. And you answered," Elena asked. "No," Marco replied quickly. "Neither did anyone else. Someone made sure of that." She didn't need him to explain who. That night, Elena drove to the cliffs without waiting for an invitation. Dante was already there, standing by the glass wall overlooking the ocean, his silhouette sharp against the dark water. He turned as she entered, unsurprised, as if her arrival had been inevitable. "You're rearranging my life," Elena said, skipping any attempt at politeness. "Without asking." "I'm preventing it from being taken apart," Dante replied calmly. "You don't get to decide what that looks like." A pause, brief but deliberate. "Someone else already decided," he said. "I simply intervened." The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. "You're talking about me like I'm an asset. I'm talking about you like you're a target," Dante corrected. Elena laughed, sharp and humorless. "And you think standing next to you makes that better?" "Yes." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The implication hung between them, heavy and undeniable. "You canceled a deal because of me," Elena said quietly. "Marco told me." Dante didn't deny it. "It wasn't worth the risk." "You lost money. I lose money every day," he replied. "I don't lose people I choose to protect." The words struck deeper than she expected. Elena felt anger rise, tangled with something far more dangerous. Gratitude? You didn't ask if I wanted that protection, she said. No, Dante agreed, because wanting it doesn't change the danger. She turned away, pressing her palms against the cold glass, staring out at the endless black sea. I have a daughter, she said. She didn't choose this either. Dante joined her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence without him touching her. That's why I won't step back, he said quietly. Elena closed her eyes. Then you're forcing me into a corner. Yes, Dante admitted, but not alone. The next warning came sooner than she expected. Elena was halfway through her set the following night when she noticed the man near the bar. He wasn't watching her directly. He was watching the room. His phone rested loosely in his hand, camera angled just enough to make her stomach drop. After the performance, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Beautiful voice. Another message followed before she could react. Your daughter had strawberry milk today. She spilled some on her sleeve. The room seemed to tilt. Elena locked herself in the storage room, her hands shaking as she called Dante. He answered instantly. They contacted you. He said, they know Maya. Elena whispered. Yes. The simplicity of his response cut through her like ice. You knew this was coming. I knew it was possible. Dante replied. I was trying to delay it. Anger flared, fierce and uncontrolled. Delay doesn't protect a child, oh, he said quietly. Preparation does. When Dante arrived minutes later, summoned by a single wordless text, Elena did not shout. She did not accuse. She simply looked at him and understood something that terrified her more than the threats themselves. Dante Russo was not the danger she had stepped into. He was the barrier between her and something far worse. That night, Elena stood in Maya's doorway long after her daughter fell asleep. Watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, she realized then that love was not the opposite of fear. It was the reason fear existed at all, and for the first time. Elena began to question not whether she should walk away from Dante Russo, but whether she could afford to. The first time Maya spoke Dante's name, Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Is he coming again? Her daughter asked casually one morning, swinging her backpack as Elena knelt to tie her shoes. The tall man who smells like the ocean? Elena's hands stilled. Why do you ask? Maya shrugged, the way children did when they sensed more than they understood. He looks serious, but not mean. The words followed Elena all the way to the club later that night. Serious, but not mean. She had spent her entire adult life avoiding men like Dante Russo, men whose power bent rooms and rewrote rules. And yet, her child had looked at him and seen something else entirely. That frightened her more than any threat. The pressure increased quietly after that, like water rising behind a dam. Elena noticed it in fragments. A car that followed her for 3 blocks before turning away. A phone call that disconnected the moment she answered. A stranger who lingered too long across the street from Maya's school, pretending to scroll through his phone. Each incident alone could be dismissed. Together, they formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Dante noticed before Elena confronted him. They're testing boundaries, he said over the phone one evening. His voice was controlled, but there was an edge beneath it now. Distances, timing, reactions. You promised transparency, Elena replied sharply. This doesn't feel like it. I promised honesty, Dante corrected. Not comfort. She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. Then be honest. How close are they? There was a pause, short, measured. They know about Maya. The world seemed to tilt. Elena's breath caught, her chest tightening until it hurt. How she whispered, They've been watching you longer than I have, Dante said. Longer than I realized. The admission struck harder than any threat. The idea that danger had circled her life silently, unseen, long before Dante ever noticed her voice or her face, left her feeling exposed in a way she could not shake. You knew this could happen, Elena said, anger bleeding into fear. And you didn't tell me. Because fear makes people run, Dante replied quietly. And running would have put you directly in their path. So you decided for me again? Yes. The certainty in his voice hollowed her out. Dante was not apologizing. He was explaining a calculation he would make again without hesitation. They met the next day at a small cafe overlooking the water, chosen deliberately for its openness. Public spaces were safer now. Elena arrived early, her eyes scanning the room, memorizing exits. Dante sat with his back to the wall, his gaze lifting the instant she entered. You shouldn't have come alone, he said softly. I won't live like I'm already hiding. Elena replied, taking the seat across from him. Dante studied her for a moment, then slid his phone across the table. The photo was grainy, taken from across the street. Maya standing near the school gate, laughing with another child, sunlight in her hair. Elena's hands trembled as she pushed the phone back. They won't act yet, Dante said. They want to see how I respond. And how are you responding? She asked. I'm drawing a line. Elena let out a bitter laugh. You're painting a target? On myself, Dante said calmly. Not on her. The conversation ended without resolution. Tension coiled tightly between them. Elena returned home with her nerves stretched thin, every sound too loud, every shadow too sharp. That night, sleep refused to come. The call arrived just before dawn. The voice on the other end was male, accented, smooth. He spoke Elena's name correctly, lingering on the syllables. He mentioned Maya's teacher, the color of her lunchbox, the way she skipped the last step on the stairs. I only want to talk, the man said pleasantly. Your friend Dante is territorial. It complicates things. Elena hung up without responding, her hands shaking violently. She did not scream. She did not cry. She went into Maya's room and sat on the floor beside the bed until her breathing slowed enough to think. When Dante arrived minutes later, summoned by a single text, Elena did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply looked at him and said, You knew they would reach out to me directly. Yes, Dante replied. And you still let my daughter stay near you. I didn't bring her into this. He said, The world did. The truth of it settled heavily between them. Elena understood then that Dante did not see himself as her savior. He saw himself as the last barrier before something inevitable. Later that evening, Maya met him again. Dante knelt to her height, careful, restrained. Maya studied him openly. Mommy says you help us. She said, I try, Dante replied. Are you going to stay? Maya asked. Elena's heart clenched. Dante glanced at Elena before answering. As long as I'm needed. Maya smiled, satisfied, and returned to her toys, as if the matter were settled. That night, Elena stood on the balcony of Dante's house, the ocean dark and endless below. Dante joined her, his presence steady at her side. If I ask you to step back, Elena said quietly, will you? Dante did not hesitate. No, the honesty should have frightened her. Instead, it anchored something inside her. Then I need to know, Elena continued, turning to face him. If this gets worse, will you still choose us? Dante met her gaze without flinching. There is no choice anymore. Elena exhaled slowly, the weight of that promise settling into her bones. Protection, once offered, could not be withdrawn without consequence. And for the first time, she accepted the truth she had been resisting since the night they met. Her life was no longer something she could guard quietly. It was entangled with his enemies, and with a love that was already asking her to risk everything she had left. Elena woke before dawn with the certainty that waiting was no longer an option. The house on the cliffs was silent except for the distant crash of waves, their rhythm steady and indifferent. She lay still for a long moment, listening, measuring the quiet the way one measured the pause before a storm. Dante had not slept either. She knew it without seeing him. There was a tension in the air that spoke of decisions being weighed and discarded. Maya slept curled on her side, one arm wrapped around the stuffed whale Dante had given her. Elena watched her daughter's chest rise and fall, committing the sight to memory as if instinct already knew something was about to change. Safety, she had learned, was not a place. It was a moment. And moments passed. At the club that evening, the unease sharpened into something unmistakable. Elena felt eyes on her before she saw the man. He stood near the bar, posture casual, expression bored. Yet everything about him was too deliberate. He didn't watch her sing. He watched the room. His phone rested loosely in his hand, angled just enough to make her pulse quicken. After the set, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. You look calmer tonight. Her fingers went cold. She didn't respond. A second message followed almost immediately. Your daughter had a red ribbon in her hair this morning. It suits her. The room tilted. Elena's breath came shallow as she pushed past the curtain and locked herself in the narrow hallway behind the stage. This time, there was no denial, no uncertainty. The threat had stepped fully into the open. She called Dante. He answered before the first ring finished. They contacted you, he said quietly. Yes, Elena replied, her voice steady through effort alone. And they're not hiding anymore. They won't, Dante said. Not now, because I'm close to you. Elena said. Or because you're close to me? There was a pause. Both. She closed her eyes. Then hiding won't work. When Dante arrived minutes later, the club seemed to shrink around him. Conversation stopped. The air shifted. He didn't touch Elena, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood beside her, and the man near the bar disappeared as if he had never been there. On the drive back to the cliffs, Elena stared out the window, her thoughts frighteningly clear. You offered to make us disappear, she said at last. Yes, and you still can, yes, but it wouldn't end anything, Elena continued. It would just delay it. Dante glanced at her, his expression unreadable. You're asking to stay. I'm choosing to, she corrected. There's a difference. Back at the house, Elena didn't go to bed. She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, waiting. Dante joined her after securing the perimeter, his movements precise, controlled. They want leverage, he said, and they believe you're mine. Elena met his gaze. Then they're wrong. The words hung between them, dangerous and deliberate. I won't be hidden, she continued. Not Maya, not me. If I disappear, I become exactly what they want, a weakness you'll do anything to protect. Dante's jaw tightened. That puts you in danger. I'm already in danger, Elena said calmly. The only thing I can change is how I stand in it. Silence stretched. The ocean roared below them, relentless. I will stay, Elena said. Here, close, visible, but I choose the terms. Dante studied her for a long moment, something fierce and reluctant colliding in his eyes. If you stay openly, he said, there will be no illusion of safety. I don't want illusion, she replied. I want control. The words surprised them both. Elena rose from her chair, standing in front of him. I won't be your secret, she said, and I won't let my daughter grow up believing fear is something we hide from. If this is your world, then I need to understand it. All of it. Dante exhaled slowly. That world destroys people. Only if they enter it blind, Elena said. For the first time. Dante hesitated, not because he doubted her resolve, but because he recognized it. He had built his empire on the same clarity, the same refusal to flinch. You're asking to stand in the center, he said. I already am, Elena replied. I'm just acknowledging it. That night, the decision was sealed without ceremony. Maya moved into the room overlooking the sea, her laughter echoing down the hallway as she explored, unaware that her mother's choice had shifted the balance of power in ways even Dante could not fully predict. Elena watched her from the doorway, pride and terror twisting together in her chest. Dante appeared beside her, his voice low. By staying, he said, You've declared a side. Elena nodded. I know. He looked at her then, really looked, not as someone to shield, but as someone who had chosen to step forward. They won't stop testing you, he warned. Then they'll learn, Elena replied softly, that I'm not something you threaten to move men like you. Dante's gaze darkened, something like respect taking root beneath the fear. As the night settled over the cliffs, Elena understood the full weight of what she had done. She had not chosen comfort. She had chosen proximity. And in Dante Russo's world, proximity was power. She was no longer a liability to be protected. She was a line that could not be crossed. Living openly inside Dante Russo's world did not soften the danger. It clarified it. Elena felt the shift immediately. The house on the cliffs no longer felt like a refuge, but a command center. Every movement measured, every silence deliberate. Security patterns changed daily. Conversations ended the moment she entered a room. Not out of distrust, but recognition. She was no longer an outsider protected by proximity. She was now part of the equation. Maya adapted with unsettling ease. She treated the guards like distant uncles, waved at them without fear, and asked questions that made grown men hesitate. Elena watched this with a mix of relief and dread. Children sensed truth long before they understood risk. Maya did not see violence in this place. She saw structure, presence, adults who paid attention. Dante noticed Elena watching him more closely now, not with suspicion, but with intent. She observed meetings from doorways, listened without interrupting, asked questions that cut straight to consequence. He did not stop her. He found, to his surprise, that he did not want to. The first crack appeared during a late-night meeting. Elena stood on the balcony, the ocean wind sharp against her skin. When raised voices drifted through the open doors, she did not mean to listen. She couldn't help it. You're dismantling too much, too fast, one of Dante's senior men argued. People are getting nervous. They should be, Dante replied coolly. All because of her, another voice pressed. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. No, Dante said. Because of what I refused to pass on. The men left shortly after. Elena remained where she was, heart pounding, understanding exactly what that hesitation had cost him. When Dante joined her moments later, his expression was unreadable. You didn't have to defend me, she said quietly. I wasn't, Dante replied. I was defending a decision, which is already weakening you. Yes, he admitted. The honesty between them had become dangerous in its own way. Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then let me carry some of it. Dante turned to her sharply. This isn't a burden you share. Everything else already is, Elena said, whether you admit it or not. That night, the warning came not as a threat, but as information. Elena found a folded note tucked neatly into the book she had been reading earlier. No fingerprints, no force. Just a message written with chilling restraint. Visibility has consequences. Choose carefully. Her pulse did not spike. It steadied. Fear no longer screamed in her chest. It focused. She took the note directly to Dante. He read it once, then burned it in silence. They're testing limits, he said. And they're not the only ones. Meaning Elena asked. Someone close is leaking small things, Dante replied. Roots, timing, nothing obvious enough to trace. Elena absorbed this, her mind already moving. You're assuming it's one of yours. It has to be. She nodded slowly. Then stop thinking like a king defending a throne. Dante raised an eyebrow. Think like a father protecting a child. Elena continued. People betray power. They hesitate against love. The words struck deeper than strategy. Dante looked at her as if seeing her fully for the first time. The escalation came 2 days later. A legitimate business under Dante's protection was raided. Not violently. Surgically. Paperwork seized, accounts frozen, no arrests. A message delivered through bureaucracy rather than bullets. Someone was showing restraint, and restraint was far more dangerous. This isn't Volkov, Dante said grimly. This is someone who wants me slow, exposed, and testing whether you'll choose power or us, Elena added. That evening, Maya asked a question that froze them both. Mommy, she said softly, coloring at the kitchen table. Are the bad people mad because we live here? Elena crouched beside her, choosing her words with care. Some people don't like change. Maya nodded. Satisfied? Then they'll get used to it. Dante turned away, his jaw tight. Elena followed him onto the balcony moments later. You see it now, he said quietly. This doesn't end with warnings. I know, Elena replied. That's why pretending I don't belong here won't protect her. She placed her hand over his. If someone inside is leaking information, they're waiting for you to flinch, for you to hide us, for you to prove we're your weakness. Dante met her gaze, something fierce and conflicted burning there. And if I don't, then they escalate, Elena said, which means we control when and how. The idea hung between them, dangerous and deliberate. You're suggesting bait, Dante said. I'm suggesting choice, Elena corrected. Theirs or ours. That night, as the house settled into uneasy quiet, Elena lay awake listening to the sea. She understood now that love in this world was not a shield. It was a signal, a declaration. By choosing to stand openly beside Dante, she had not reduced the danger. She had concentrated it. And somewhere, in the careful movements of men who watched and waited, someone was preparing to strike not at the woman who hid behind protection, but at the one who had chosen to step into the light. The storm was no longer approaching. It was already inside the walls. Elena understood she had crossed the point of return the moment the message arrived. It wasn't threatening. It didn't need to be. A location? A time? Midnight? Come alone? She read it twice, then a third time, her pulse steady in a way that frightened her more than panic ever could. Whoever had sent it knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't an ambush disguised as bravado. It was an invitation built on certainty. She didn't show it to Dante. Instead, she went to Maya's room. Her daughter slept sprawled across the bed, one leg tangled in the blanket, hair fanned across the pillow. Elena sat beside her, smoothing a curl away from Maya's face, breathing in the quiet warmth of her. This was the truth beneath everything. Not power, not fear, not even love. Choice. Elena made hers. She left a note on the kitchen counter, sliding it beneath a stack of papers Dante never bothered to read. If I'm not back by morning, trust no one. Not even me. Then she dressed simply. dark clothes without weight or ornament, hair pulled back, movements calm and deliberate. She did not take one of Dante's cars. She arranged her own ride, one he wouldn't trace until it was too late. The warehouse district was silent at that hour, the city holding its breath. The building loomed against the night sky, lights sparse, shadows deep. Elena stepped inside alone, the echo of her footsteps the only sound that acknowledged her presence. He emerged from the darkness as if he had always been there. Volkov was not what she expected. Not towering, not theatrical. He smiled easily, hands open, posture relaxed. Power radiated from him not through force, but confidence. "You came," he said pleasantly. "That tells me a great deal about you. It tells you I'm a mother," Elena replied evenly. "Nothing more," Volkov chuckled. "It tells me you understand leverage." Elena didn't flinch. "You asked for me. Talk." They moved slowly, circling one another in the vast empty space, words measured like steps on unstable ground. Volkov spoke of Dante's mistakes, of how attachment blurred judgment. He spoke as if Elena were a concept rather than a person. "You've changed him," Volkov said. "That makes you valuable." "I didn't change him," Elena replied. "I revealed him." The smile faltered for just a moment. What Volkov didn't realize, what he could not afford to, was that Elena wasn't there to negotiate peace. She was there to buy time. At the house on the cliffs, Dante felt the absence before he found the note. It wasn't intuition. It was pattern recognition, a disruption in the rhythm of the place. When he read her words, something cold and exact settled in his chest. "She's gone," he said quietly. The house snapped into motion. Dante didn't shout. He didn't rage. Orders flowed from him with lethal clarity. Routes triangulated, signals traced. Every second accounted for. Elena had walked directly into the trap he had been trying to collapse for weeks. By the time Dante reached the warehouse district, the night had fractured. Gunfire shattered the silence. Elena hit the ground as chaos erupted, her mind sharp even as her body reacted on instinct. She crawled behind a crate, breath controlled, heart pounding. This was the moment she had prepared for, not rescue, not heroics, but survival. Dante stormed through the entrance like a force of nature, his presence shifting the balance instantly. His men followed, precise and relentless. Volkov retreated deeper into the building, curses echoing off steel and concrete. The confrontation was brutal and brief. When it ended, Volkov lay wounded but alive, pinned beneath Dante's boot, blood darkening the floor. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Elena rose slowly, legs trembling now that the danger had passed. Dante turned toward her, fury and relief colliding in his eyes. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, his voice raw. "She threatened Maya," Elena said simply. "I couldn't wait." Understanding cut through his anger, leaving something exposed behind it. Dante pulled her into him, holding her with a force that spoke of fear he would never admit aloud. "You should have trusted me," he said against her hair. "I did," Elena replied. "That's why I went." Volkov laughed weakly from the floor. "You see," he rasped. "She's not yours to protect. She's the reason you'll fall." Dante's expression hardened as he turned back to him. "No," he said coldly. "She's the reason you already have." As Volkov was taken away, Elena understood the truth that would change everything. She was no longer bait. She was the catalyst. And by choosing to step into the trap willingly, she had forced the world around Dante Russo to reveal itself. The war was no longer theoretical. It had a face, and it had chosen her in return. The silence after the gunfire was worse than the noise. Elena stood in the warehouse long after Volkov was taken away, the echo of sirens fading into the distance like a warning that refused to disappear. The smell of metal and dust clung to her clothes, settling into her skin. Her hands were steady now, but her body felt hollow, as if something essential had been torn loose and not yet replaced. Dante moved through the aftermath with brutal efficiency. Orders were given. Evidence disappeared. The scene was erased piece by piece, as if violence could be undone through discipline alone. When he finally turned back to Elena, the fury that had burned moments earlier was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous restraint. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm alive," Elena replied. That was the point. He didn't answer. Instead, he guided her toward the waiting car, his hand firm at her back, not possessive, but grounding. The drive back to the cliffs passed in silence, the city lights blurring into indistinct streaks against the window. Elena leaned her forehead against the glass, letting the motion carry her while her thoughts caught up. The house felt altered when they returned, not violated, but aware, like a place that had witnessed something irreversible and would never forget it. Elena went straight to Maya. Her daughter slept peacefully, one arm flung over the blanket, lips parted in a soft sigh. Elena sank to her knees beside the bed, pressing her face briefly into the mattress. The relief came late and sharp, leaving her breathless. She stayed there until her heart slowed, until the reality of safety felt solid enough to trust. Dante watched from the doorway. Later, they sat in the kitchen as dawn crept across the floor, pale and unforgiving. No guards, no interruptions, just the truth that had been circling them since the night they met. He said something. Elena began quietly. "Before you came?" Dante's jaw tightened. "What did he say that I was being watched long before you noticed me? That our meeting wasn't accidental?" The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Dante exhaled slowly. "He's not lying," he said, "but he's not telling the whole truth either." Elena's chest tightened. "Then tell me. I noticed anomalies." Dante said, "Small ones. Inquiries that didn't make sense. A singer with no obvious leverage drawing the wrong kind of attention. I had you looked into." And Elena asked, "And I realized someone else was already watching." He replied, "That's when I stepped closer. Not to control you, to disrupt whatever plan existed before I arrived." Elena absorbed this in silence. She had not been chosen at random, but neither had she been chosen as prey. She had been a variable in a game she didn't know existed. "You didn't tell me," she said finally. "No," Dante admitted. "Because knowing earlier wouldn't have protected you. It would have made you afraid." Fear, Elena realized, had never been her weakness. Silence had been. She rose from the table, pacing slowly. "I walked into that warehouse knowing I might not come back," she said, "not because I trust you blindly, but because I needed control." Dante watched her carefully. "And did you find it?" "Yes," Elena said. "But it cost something." The cost became clear before either of them could speak again. Calls began arriving within hours. Not threats, calculations. Allies distancing themselves. Partners questioning alignment. Volkov's capture had destabilized arrangements that had held for years. Dante listened, responded, and in several cases, refused. Elena saw the impact immediately. Meetings canceled, accounts frozen, operations scaled back or severed entirely. Power did not collapse all at once. It eroded, relentlessly. "You're losing ground," Elena said quietly that evening. "I'm shedding it," Dante replied. "There's a difference." "For me," she said. "For what I refuse to protect with blood," he corrected. That night, Maya asked a question that cut deeper than any threat. "Mommy," she whispered as Elena tucked her in. "Are we going to stay here?" Elena smiled softly. "Yes." "With him?" Maya asked. Elena hesitated only a moment. "Yes." Maya nodded, satisfied. "Then it's okay." The simplicity of the answer broke something open inside Elena. Later, on the balcony overlooking the restless sea, she turned to Dante. "If it comes down to it," she said, "will you choose power, or my daughter?" Dante didn't hesitate. "Your daughter." The certainty in his voice was not dramatic. It was final. The final twist arrived quietly, carried in a thin folder left on Dante's desk. The leak had been identified. Not one of Dante's oldest allies. Not a rival pretending to be loyal, but someone Elena recognized immediately. A face she had spoken to more than once. Someone close enough to listen, trusted enough to observe. The betrayal sent a chill through her that no ocean wind could dispel. "The danger isn't finished," Elena said softly, closing the file. "No," Dante agreed. "But it's clearer now." Elena met his gaze. Understanding that clarity was not comfort. It was responsibility. She had stepped into this world to protect her child. Now, she was helping decide how it would end. And that knowledge changed her forever. The city did not erupt after Volkov's fall. It recalibrated. Elena sensed it in the quiet before she saw it in numbers and faces. Invitations stopped arriving. Meetings that once filled Dante's calendar vanished without explanation. Certain names, once spoken with deference, were suddenly avoided. Power, she realized, did not disappear in a single collapse. It withdrew its hand slowly, testing whether what remained would beg for it back. The traitor was contained within 48 hours. Dante did not let Elena witness the confrontation. He never would. But when he returned that night, something had shifted behind his eyes. Not shock, not rage, fatigue, the kind that followed the final acceptance of a truth long denied. "It's done," he said quietly. "For now," Elena replied. He nodded once. They both understood that done was a temporary word in this world. The consequences arrived without warning. A message moved through channels Elena did not fully understand, but could feel in its weight. An ultimatum disguised as prudence. If Dante continued to dismantle certain operations, retaliation would not come for him directly. It would reach for the most efficient leverage available. Maya? Elena read the words twice, then folded the message carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Her hands did not shake. Fear no longer arrived as panic. It arrived as clarity. She found Dante in Maya's room, sitting on the floor beside the bed, watching their daughter sleep. The scene stopped her short. The most dangerous man she had ever known sat perfectly still, as if even breathing too loudly might shatter the fragile peace of that moment. They won't stop, Elena said softly. Dante didn't look up. I know. They won't accept distance, she continued. Or silence, or promises. Dante rose slowly, closing the door behind them. I will not give them you, he said immediately. Or her. I know, Elena replied. That's why I'm asking for something else. He turned sharply. No, you haven't heard it yet. Dante's jaw tightened. I don't need to. Elena met his gaze, steady and unyielding. You taught me how power works, she said. Not what it looks like, what it costs. Silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. They believe I'm your weakness, Elena continued. They believe you'll burn everything to protect me. Dante said nothing. So let them be right, Elena said quietly. Just not in the way they expect. Realization dawned slowly in his eyes. You're asking me to step away. I'm asking you to choose what remains when you do. He turned away, pacing the room like a caged animal. That would dismantle what's left of my position. Yes, Elena agreed. And it would end the leverage. Dante stopped. They'll see it as surrender. They'll see it as retreat, Elena said. And they'll move on, because power they can't provoke is power they can't control. Dante faced her again, his expression raw. You're asking me to erase myself. Elena stepped closer. I'm asking you to survive. The word hung between them, heavier than any threat. And Maya, Dante asked finally. Elena swallowed. She grows up without men circling her name like a target. The decision did not come quickly. It came with a list. Assets transferred. Alliances dissolved. Operations shuttered under the cover of legitimacy. Dante executed the most dangerous maneuver of his life with ruthless precision. To the outside world, it looked like weakness. To those who truly understood the game, it looked like sacrifice. Elena watched him give up pieces of himself without complaint. Each call ended something permanent. Each signature closed a door that would never open again. You don't have to do this, she said once, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Dante replied. I do. By morning, the balance had shifted. The retaliation never came. Instead, there was distance, watchful, calculated, but restrained. The world adjusted to Dante Russo no longer being the axis it revolved around. That night, they sat together at the kitchen table while Maya colored between them, humming softly. The normalcy of it felt unreal, fragile, earned. Elena watched Dante as he traced a finger along the edge of the table, the weight of his choices finally settling into his posture. Do you regret it? She asked. He looked at her, then at Maya. No, he said without hesitation. For the first time, I chose something I could lose without destroying myself. Elena reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. She understood now that love had not softened him. It had refined him, stripping away everything that demanded blood in exchange for power. Outside, the ocean continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to what had been lost and what remained. Peace had not been granted. It had been purchased. And both of them knew that nothing bought at such a cost was ever truly free. But as Elena leaned into Dante's shoulder, watching their daughter's quiet joy, she allowed herself one fragile certainty. Whatever came next would no longer be dictated by fear. It would be chosen. Writing, open brace ID equals quote 99041 quote, variant equals quote standard quote close brace. The morning arrived without urgency. Elena noticed it first in the way sunlight entered the kitchen, unfiltered and quiet, touching the table where Maya sat, drawing with the fierce concentration of a child building a universe that made sense. There were no phones ringing, no footsteps outside that needed tracking, no conversations conducted in half voices behind closed doors. The absence of tension felt unfamiliar, like stepping into a room after the music had stopped and realizing you could finally hear yourself breathe. Dante watched from the doorway, coffee cooling in his hand. He no longer stood like a man guarding a perimeter. He stood like someone learning where to place himself when there was nothing left to defend with force. The city had accepted his retreat with unsettling speed. A few rumors circulated. A few old allies reached out, cautious and curious. Most moved on. Power, Elena realized, had never been loyal. It simply flowed toward resistance. When resistance vanished, so did obsession. That afternoon, Elena took Maya back to the club. The space smelled the same polished wood, old smoke, familiar ghosts. Marco stared when he saw them, surprise flashing across his face before relief softened it. "You're back," he said, as if he hadn't been sure she ever would be. "I never left," Elena replied gently. She sang that night for the first time in weeks, not for survival, not for protection, but because she wanted to. Her voice carried differently now. It no longer held desperation or defiance. It held something steadier. Choice. When she finished, the applause felt warmer, less urgent, like gratitude rather than escape. Dante listened from the back, unnoticed, unguarded, allowing himself to simply exist in the same room as her without consequence. Later, as they walked home through streets that no longer demanded calculation, Maya skipped ahead, laughter echoing between buildings. Elena reached for Dante's hand without thinking. He took it easily, the gesture natural in a way that startled them both. "This is strange," he said quietly. "What is?" Elena asked. "Being here," Dante replied. Without measuring the cost, Elena smiled. "You already paid it." They did not return to the house on the cliffs that night. They didn't need to. Days turned into routines. Ordinary ones, school mornings and grocery lists. Elena taught Maya new songs. Dante learned how to cook without consulting anyone. The world did not intrude. When it tried, it found nothing sharp enough to catch on. One evening, as the three of them sat on the living room floor assembling a puzzle that Maya had abandoned halfway through, she looked up suddenly. "Are we staying together?" she asked. Elena and Dante exchanged a glance, neither surprised by the question. Children always knew when a story reached its end. "Yes," Elena said softly. Maya nodded, satisfied, and returned to her puzzle. Later, when the apartment was quiet and the city hummed beyond the windows, Elena leaned against the balcony railing. Dante joined her, the night air cool against their skin. "You could rebuild," Elena said. "If you wanted." "I know," Dante replied. "You won't," she said. "No," he agreed, because rebuilding would mean remembering who I had to be. Elena turned toward him. "Do you miss it?" Dante considered the question carefully. "I miss certainty," he admitted. "I don't miss power." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Then stay here, with us." He looked at her for a long moment, something unguarded settling into his expression. "I already am." There was no dramatic declaration, no promise carved into stone, just presence, chosen, again and again. Weeks later, Elena stood on stage at a small benefit concert, her voice filling the room as Maya watched proudly from the front row. Dante stood beside her. No longer a shadow, no longer a threat, just a man learning how to belong without owning. As the final note faded, Elena met Dante's gaze across the room. There was no fear in it, no calculation, only recognition. Their story did not end with absolution. It ended with something rarer, a future that did not demand blood to protect love, a family shaped by choice, not force, a happiness earned, not stolen. And in that quiet truth, Elena understood that some endings were not about what you survived. They were about what you refused to become in order to live.